What is up, guys? Matt here. So I've been sort of wanting to do this video for a while. So on one of my streams yesterday, somebody brought up the PlayStation Classic, and I sort of gave a little quick impressions of how I thought about it. But I've been wanting to do a proper full-on video about this for quite a while. So as you can see in front of me, I've got the list of the games that are on the PlayStation Classic, 100% confirmed. So I'm going to go through them, and then I'm going to go through what I would have liked to have seen on the PlayStation Classic, ideally. Now, there are some stipulations. Games like the Crash Bandicoot series, not the Rayman series, sorry, the Spyro series, Gran Turismo, Tony Hawk, they're not going to be on my list because of licensing issues, among other things. I've also forgot to mention Medieval. So the problem is, Crash and Spyro and Medieval, right? They're all getting their own remasters. Well, actually, Crash and Spyro have already got theirs. Medieval's out next year. Now, I understand that the remasters shouldn't affect the fact that they can be on this classic console, and you're absolutely right, they shouldn't. But I think the problem is, I think Sony probably did maybe want one or two Crash and Spyro games on there, but I have a feeling that Activision didn't allow it. I think it's Activision that stopped them being put on there. So you can't do anything about that. Activision owns both Crash and Spyro, and they can say that's that. At the end of the day, they make the decisions. Unfortunately. Medieval's a bit of a different case. Obviously, Medieval is owned by Sony, but they're making a remaster obviously next year, so that probably does affect why it isn't on there. Tony Hawk is down to licensing. Gran Turismo is also down to licensing. So I don't think there was any chance we were going to get any of those games. I don't think there was any chance we were going to get a Tony Hawk or a Gran Turismo, unfortunately. So anyway, let's go through the list. So Battle Arena Toshinden, that is a one-on-one fighting game. One of the earliest fighting games on the PlayStation. I think it might have been one of the launch games. They've got a better fighting game on the console anyway, so really it didn't need to be on there. Number 2, Cool Borders 2. It's a snowboarding game. I've never been into it. Never been into snowboarding games. Never been into many sport games really. I feel like it was sort of a poor man's replacement for a Tony Hawk's game. And obviously they managed to get the license for it. But a lot of people say Cool Borders 3 is the better game. So why they put 2 and not 3, I don't know. Number 3, Destruction Derby. That is a driving game, but not really. It's Destruction Derbies. You just ram into other cars trying to destroy them. Never played it. There's better racing games on the PlayStation, so I don't really think it needed to be on there. Number 4, Final Fantasy VII. Finally, we get to a game that should be on there and is on there. Thankfully, Final Fantasy VII is obviously, probably the most. Well, it is the most famous JRPG on the PlayStation 1. It's the most infamous, certainly, and I'd probably say it was the most highly rated one. Not to say that it is the best JRPG on the PlayStation, because that's definitely up for debate. But it had to be on the system. It was one of the ones that they had to have on there. So number 5, Grand Theft Auto. This is the first original Grand Theft Auto. Bird's eye view is nothing like the new Grand Theft Autos. I think it was also released on PC, so whether or not it really needs to be on the PlayStation Classic, I'm not so sure. I don't think we needed a Grand Theft Auto on there. I think they just put it on there because of the name recognition. So yeah, I don't think that really needed to be on there. So number 6 is a bit of an odd one, Intelligent Cube. So it's a puzzle game. I hadn't heard of it until the PlayStation Classic. Apparently it's a apparently it is sort of a classic, but not many people have heard of it. I very much doubt. But those that do like it, obviously, they're probably happy with it being on the list. But I'm not so sure it really should have been on the PlayStation Classic when there's only 20 games. Up next is another slightly odd one. Number 7 is Jumping Flash. That is, I think it's another really early launch game. I think it might have been a launch game. It's a 3D platform, one of the very first ones actually. Never played it, and I hadn't heard of it until the PlayStation Classic, so it's another one I'd never heard of. Purely out of interest, I think it might. I've heard good things about it, so perhaps it should. I think it probably does deserve to be on the PlayStation Classic, seeing as the PlayStation is mainly known for its platformers and JRPGs. So number 8, this is another must on it. Metal Gear Solid. This had to be on there. Thankfully, it is. Up there along with Final Fantasy VII, I'd probably say is the two most famous PlayStation 1 games. Obviously, bar Crash and Spyro and all that. But yeah, it had to be on there, so it was a given. Number 9, Mr. Driller. It's another puzzle game. I'd probably say it is the more known puzzle game out of all of these. I didn't know about it, but I've never actually played it. I think I may have played a demo back in the day, but I never had the full game. It's an okay puzzle game. I think it probably, if they were if they were only given one choice to put a puzzle game on there, I think Mr. Driller probably should have been the one that gets put on there. Number 10, this is quite a well-known game, Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. It's sort of a puzzle game. It's sort of adventure puzzle game. It's a lot of people probably know this, so it's, I suppose it should probably be on there. And obviously they managed to get the license for it. I don't actually know if they needed it. I don't know. Maybe Sony own Oddworld. No, they can't do, because Oddworld Munchie's Odyssey is exclusive to Xbox, so that can't be right. But they managed to get the license for the game, whatever. So yeah, it's not much more to say about that. Number 11. This is the most shocking one on the actual entire list, really. Persona, the very first Persona game. It's called Persona Revelations, or Revelations Persona. Now, Persona, the series Persona, no one can argue, is a very, very good JRPG series. Especially with the success of Persona 5, it's absolutely blown up. But there are a few problems with the first Persona game, and that is apparently the non-Japanese version of Persona 1 was a highly gimped version that was missing an entire storyline, among other things. So among the Persona purists, no one's probably going to be happy with that version of it. And obviously people that aren't into JRPGs anyway are going to be like, what the hell is that anyway? So maybe that probably shouldn't have been on the list. Or they could have picked Persona 2. So anyway, number 12, Rayman. I would probably say this does definitely deserve to be on the list. Obviously, it is on a lot of other platforms. I played it on the PlayStation 1. And my memories of it are on the PlayStation 1. And I sort of do associate Rayman with PlayStation, mainly. Great 2D platformer. Started off the Rayman series. There's not much more you to say about that. I think it deserved to be on there. So, our first horror game, Resident Evil Director's Cut. In fact, realistically, it's our only horror game on here. So, obviously, everyone knows the Resident Evil series, zombies, tank controls, mansions, raccoon, cities, monsters, The director's cut version, interestingly enough, not too sure about that. People say that one of the versions of the director's cut's is totally awful. So, and I'm assuming we don't know which version it is yet. But Resident Evil, there had to be a Resident Evil game on the PlayStation Classic. It's just a point of contention what one they should have put on there, and I don't think anyone would agree. No one could agree on one, so it's very difficult. Number 14, Ridge Racer Type 4. So the first proper racing game on the Classic, arguably, and the only proper racing game on here, pretty much. The people seem to think that the best racing games on the platform are Driver 2, Ridge Racer Type 4, and Gran Turismo 2. Obviously, they managed to put one of them on. The other two, sadly, didn't make the list. But we know why Gran Turismo didn't. I'm not too sure about why Driver didn't. But at least they put the best Ridge Racer game on there. So number 15, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, another puzzle game with a sort of Street Fighter skin. A lot of people say this is the best puzzle game on the PlayStation, but it's just sort of what's it like? It's sort of like Tetris, isn't it? I think, sort of, or not Buster Move. There's another game where it's like sort of like Sonic's Mean Bean Machine, stuff like that. But people like it just because it's got Street Fighter franchise sort of crossover. I don't necessarily think we needed 3 puzzle games on the system, so it's hard to say with that. Number 16, Siphon Filter. A bit like Metal Gear Solid, really. It's sort of like a stealth game, stealth action game. People say it's a cult. People say it's a classic, and they put it right up there with Metal Gear Solid. So, you know, having both of them on there, maybe, I don't know, maybe we didn't need both, but I think the majority of people, if they had to take one of them off, Siphon Filter would be the one that they take off. Number 17, this was already revealed, of the original 5, Tekken 3. People say it's the best fighting game on the system. I'd probably have a hard time arguing against that, to be honest with you. Tekken 3, I think a lot of people genuinely equate Tekken 3 as being the best Tekken game. So, you know, they chose well with that one, really. But the problem is, right, you got Tekken 3 on there, so Battle Arena Toshinden, what is the point? What was the point? You know. Anyway, number 18, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. Out of all the games on this list, this is probably the one I'd say doesn't deserve to be on here the most. Okay, I get it. It's a first-person shooter, and it's of the Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six series. But what, you know, it didn't need to be on there. It just didn't need to be on there. You know, there's other first-person shooters on the PlayStation, believe it or not, that should have filled that spot. And the fact that we haven't got DualShock and analog sticks makes the gameplay even worse. You know, playing first-person shooters without analog sticks is generally a recipe for disaster. So that I don't know what they were thinking when they put that on there. Number 19, Twisted Metal. So another sort of destruction vehicle driving game. People say Twisted Metal 2 or 3 is better than 1. Why they put 1 on there, I do not know. The fact that Twisted Metal's on there, do we really need Destruction Derby? I know Destruction Derby is an entirely different sort of destruction game, but Twisted Metal it makes Destruction Derby obsolete, in my opinion. Number 20, final one, Wild Arms, another JRPG. So we've got 3 JRPGs on the system, which is okay. Wild Arms and Final Fantasy VII, I'd argue, were good choices. They were both of the original 5 that were revealed. Unfortunately, I've never played Wild Arms, but I imagine I'll end up playing it at some point, seeing as this system is going to have it on there. Well, that's not to say I'm getting the system. Definitely not straight away, anyway. But I've only heard good things about Wild Arms, and the series went on to make multiple games. So, over here on the right is the games that I would have liked to have seen on the PlayStation Classic. There are going to be some that are still that have stayed the same, and there will be changes. So the first one is I've changed the font to white so you couldn't see them throughout the beginning of the video. So there's a bit of a surprise. So the first game is number 1, Ape Escape. Now the problem is Ape Escape was the first game that had to be played with DualShock analog stick controller. And unfortunately, with this PlayStation Classic, we are not getting a DualShock controller. So realistically, Ape Escape would be impossible to play on it. But that doesn't mean it didn't deserve to be on there. They should have made a DualShock controller for it, at least one DualShock controller, and included Ape Escape. It is an absolute amazing game. It is a PlayStation Classic. It should have been on there. As soon as we knew that the PlayStation Classic wasn't going to have DualShock controller, everyone was like, oh great, that means we're not getting Ape Escape. So clearly it deserved to be on there. It's a very fun game. So, up next is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. What possible reason could they have for not having one of arguably the best PlayStation game of all time not on the system? Yes, it's made by Konami. Konami let them use Metal Gear Solid. Right? Yes, I understand that there was Castlevania Requiem was released on the PlayStation 4 store. So you get Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Castlevania Rondo of Blood in one bundle. But that does not mean it should not have been included on the PlayStation Classic. That game alone being included on the PlayStation Classic would have made more people buy the system. That is a system seller. So it's a very sad affair that it's not on the system. It's very disappointing indeed. So, up next, number 3. Legend of Dragoon. Legend of Dragoon is a JRPG. It was published and made by Sony, I believe, so they have the rights to it. They could have put that on there, no questions asked, and yet for some reason they chose not to. It's a cult classic. People that know about it, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything bad about this ever. People make arguments that that is the best JRPG on the PlayStation. You know, better than Final Fantasy VII. You know, so why wasn't it on there? You had the rights to it. You know, that would have been a easy ringer. That would have been. So there you go. Number 4. Final Fantasy VII stayed the same, obviously. That should be on there regardless. Final Fantasy VIII. Now, this is where my list would be getting a bit controversial. A lot of people would definitely swap out 8 for 9 in a heartbeat because the fan favourites seem to be 7 and 8. 7 and 9, sorry. 8 seems to just get completely ignored. No one wants anything to do with it. It's the black sheep of the Final Fantasy trilogy on PlayStation 1. But for me, I actually prefer it to 7 and 9. I like the characters. I like the fact they added the Triple Triad card game. Yes, okay, people couldn't get on with the draw magic system. But it was something interesting. And it looks great. The game does look amazing compared to 7. So I think it should have been on there. And on my list, you still got 7, so you can't cry that I've removed 7 and replaced it with 8. Number 6. Klonoa. Klonoa is such an amazing 2.5D platformer. It's definitely a classic on the system. Klonoa is such an underrated series. I can't stress that enough. I mean, Klonoa 1 was amazing. Klonoa 2 was absolutely amazing as well. There's a few Game Boy games, there was a remake or a remaster of Klonoa 1 on the Wii. Unfortunately, it didn't sell very well, and the Klonoa series has lied dormant ever since. and it really doesn't deserve to. Klonoa should be one of those series that's still going strong today. Klonoa is such a good mascot, and the games are so good. They could have at least honoured it by putting it on the PlayStation Classic. Klonoa is owned by Namco. I believe Namco. What games on the PlayStation Classic did Namco have a hand in making? I think they made Ridge Racer. I think that might be it though. But still, Klonoa should have been on there. Amazing platformer game. Number 7. Jumping Flash stayed the same. I think it deserves to be on there. Number 8. Metal Gear Solid again deserves to be on there. It deserves to stay. Number 9. Mr. Driller again deserves to stay. Good puzzle game. Interesting puzzle game. Number 10. Tombi. Another platformer. Another 2D platformer. Or it might be another 2.5D platformer. Very interesting game. Another classic on the system. I played the demo. Sadly, never played the full game. It's a very interesting game. Arguably, probably the least known platformer on the PlayStation 1. But those that are in the know how good it is. Should have been on there really. Sad that it's not. Would have been a very interesting game to put on there. Number 11. Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver. Now, the Legacy of Kain series is dormant. It's pretty much dead. But it's quite an interesting series. The first 2 games came out on the PlayStation 1. Soul Reaver is the second game. You could have swapped it out for Blood Omen, I suppose, but I think Soul Reaver seems like the smarter choice. It's an action game with a little bit of puzzle mixed in. Actually, quite a lot of puzzle mixed in, probably. Never completed it, but I did play it back in the day. Quite an interesting series. I think one of the games should have definitely been on there. It's quite a fun series. Anyone that's never played them, maybe check them out if they're on the PlayStation Store, or if you've got an original PlayStation. You know, check out the series. This might be to your tastes. Number 12. Rayman staying the same. Great platformer, deserved to stay on there. Now number 13. Resident Evil. So, slight difference here. I think that they should have just had the original OG Resident Evil, the first version of it, and not the director's cut. Purely because of this awful director's cut version that people talk about, why not just go with the original version? I think the director's cut added analog stick control support. What's the point? We haven't got an analog stick to use. They also messed up the music. So why not just have the OG version of Resident Evil? That seemed like the smarter choice. Or you could have had Resident Evil 2 or 3. Any of them, people would have been unhappy. People would have been happy. You're not going to get everyone happy. And obviously you can't have all 3 Resident Evil games on there. So, you know, just have the original to appease some of the fans. So number 14. Silent Bomber. This is quite an underrated game as well. I don't know if it's unheard of necessarily, but certainly not a lot of people know about it. It's sort of like an action game. I think it actually might have been made by Namco, so that's another game they could have been put on there. Why? I think it should have been on there. It's a very fun game. And there's not really a lot else to say about it. I just enjoyed playing it back in the day. I think a lot of people would get on with it. It's definitely one of those games, if you haven't heard of it, definitely check it out. It's worth at least investigating. I always found it quite a quality game. Back in the day, I never actually had the full version of it. I only got the full version of it a few years ago, but I've never even played through it all the way. So that's definitely a game I need to to sit down and play all the way through. So number 15, Alundra, an RPG. It's not really it's not a JRPG. I don't think. I think Sony made it. So it's another Legend of Dragoon case where why isn't it on there? You had the rights to it, I'm assuming. It's sort of like a PlayStation version of Legend of Zelda. I did know about it back in the day. Unfortunately, I think we did have one of the games. I think we might have had the first one, but unfortunately, it's lost. I don't know where it is. It's gone somewhere, but I haven't seen it for years, like a decade. So I haven't got it anymore. I'd love to get it again and play it. So why not put it on the PlayStation Classic and play it? You know, literally all you had. Literally, it's just all you had to do was say these words, right? If you had to describe Alundra, I'm sure most people do. They literally do just say PlayStation version of Legend of Zelda, and that's enough. That's all you need to say about it. That is big enough selling point for the Alundra series to get people interested in it. You know, it should have been on there. It's a banger. It's a banging classic, and the fact that you own the rights to it or even made it, why isn't it on there? Number 16, Disruptor. Okay, so this was made by Insomniac Games, who obviously famously made the Spyro and Ratchet and Clank series. This was their first ever game, I believe. First-person shooter. And my whole thought process was this should have replaced Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. If you can have a first-person on there, you either have Doom, Duke Nukem, or Disruptor. Now, Disruptor probably would have been one of the easy choices because obviously I imagine Insomniac Games still have quite a close relationship with Sony, so they probably would have been okay with them putting Disruptor on there. And it's a pretty fun first-person shooter, so why not? Why not put it on there, especially over Rainbow Six? Number 17, Tekken 3. You know, best fighting game on the PlayStation Classic. You know, should have been on there. Arguably, it only needed one fighting game, and that was Tekken 3. But people also do argue that Street Fighter Alpha 3 should have been on there. I haven't played it, so I'll leave that up to you guys. Number 18, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. Now, this is a game that purely sort of on my list. Those of you that watch my videos will know that I am a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan. This was the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Game the first English Yu-Gi-Oh! Game that ever got released. The first Yu-Gi-Oh! Game I ever played. Very fond memories of playing it in my childhood. It is a good Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. It's aged reasonably well. I don't think it's aged terribly, to be fair. But obviously, barely anyone would have this on their list, so you know they would never put this on a PlayStation Classic. For starters, well, no, again, it's made by Konami, so Konami have got Metal Gear on there. So, you know, there's a couple of Konami games that I think they should have put on there. Yu-Gi-Oh! Wouldn't be one that people would ever vote for, and I know a lot of people would definitely not even give it the time of day. But this is my list, and I think Yu-Gi-Oh! I would have loved to have Yu-Gi-Oh! On there. So, number 19. We have Crash Team Racing. Now, okay, I said at the beginning of the video, no Crash game, no Crash Bandicoot game, no Spyro game, no Medieval game. But hang on a minute. Crash Team Racing hasn't been remastered or remade, and we don't know if it ever will. We don't know. So, if you could have got the license to Crash, fair enough if Activision didn't give you permission to use Crash 1, 2 or 3. They could have given you permission to use Crash Team Racing. Best kart racer on the PlayStation. People say it's the best kart racer of all time. Better than Mario Kart 64, better than Diddy Kong Racing. People say Crash Team Racing is the best kart racer. I don't know. I'm not going to start the debate. I'm not even going to tell you which I think's better because it would start a war. But if they could have just gotten one Crash game, they could have just let it be Crash Team Racing. They could have done that. I mean, we don't know. Maybe there is a Crash Team Racing remaster on the horizon, and that's why they didn't get the license to it. That's the only good reason I can see why it shouldn't have been on there. So maybe there is a silver lining to it not being on there. So finally, number 20 is, of course, Wild Arms. So I think that should have stayed on the list. Another JRPG. I've already said what I need to say about Wild Arms. So that's my list. Now, if we go through the list, we can sort of count the genres, and we can see obvious bias. I mean, Legend of Dragoon is a JRPG, Final Fantasy VII and 8 is a JRPG. Alundra is sort of an RPG, Wild Arms is an RPG. So there's only 5 to be fair. There's only a quarter of the games are JRPGs or RPGs, and then we've obviously got adventure games, Castlevania, or action adventure games. I mean, so it's Ape Escape, Castlevania, Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. That's it for that, really. Then we've got platformers, so we got Klonoa, Jumping Flash, Tombi, Rayman. That's it. That's all you need for that, really. You've got your stealth game, which is obviously Metal Gear Solid. You've got your puzzle game, Mr. Driller, and sort of Soul Reaver. Oh, I forgot to mention Silent Bomber. That should be in part of the action adventure game. What else? You've got your fighting game, Tekken 3. You've got your first-person shooter, Disruptor. A card game or strategy game, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. You've got your racing game, which is Crash Team Racing. It's a kart racer. You've got your horror game, Resident Evil 1 or 2 or 3. And that's my list. And I think that would have been a much better list, and it would have probably been received a lot better than what we actually got given. Obviously, though, the problem is, at the end of the day, Sony were kind of in trouble with this no matter what, because yes, Sony do have some good exclusives, but back then, a lot of the majority of the really good games they had were all third party. They did not own the rights to them. They don't have permission to bring them out whenever they want. The PlayStation was very much more of a third party system, whereas Nintendo is a much more of a first party system, which is where PlayStation are going to come, or Sony are going to come unstuck with these classic consoles, because are they going to be able to get the rights to games in the future with the PlayStation 2 Classic when that inevitably comes out? That's the big question, isn't it? That everyone's asking. Or are they going to perhaps release another version of the Volume 2 of the PlayStation Classic with bigger hitting games on there, like your Spyros, your Crashes, your Tomb Raiders, your Gran Turismos, your Tony Hawks? I don't think I'd be too happy with them if they did do a Volume 2, because that would imply that the first one was just well, I don't know, I'm not going to finish that sentence, but it would imply they didn't think it was very good. I don't really think I have much more to say about the PlayStation Classic, really. It is £90, which is quite a lot of money, really. I mean, it is more than the SNES and the NES Classics. And there's only 20 games. There's not a special unreleased game or anything like that. And arguably more than half the list is sort of filler, so I don't know. £90, quite a lot of money for that. And the thing that I did take into consideration with my list is some of these games that I picked are quite expensive games. I mean, Ape Escape's quite an expensive game. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is a very expensive game in the UK, especially. So is Legend of Dragoon. Klonoa's getting up there. Tombi's a very expensive game. Wild Arms is quite an expensive game. So there are a couple of games on my list that have quite a high value. So if my list was the real list, then you would be getting arguably your money's worth. Even if you didn't like some of these games on my list, for the most part, that list is worthy of £90, whereas this list here is not worth £90. So yeah, that's my opinion on the PlayStation Classic. For those that were interested in what my thoughts were, very disappointing. Obviously, is the system going to be hackable? Probably it will be. I'm not going to advocate for you to buy a PlayStation Classic to hack it and add your own games, because you know that's not PC. And I'm not going to say any more on the hacking scene. That's up to you to research after launch. But yes, this is that's my opinions on the PlayStation Classic overall. If I had to give them a grade, I'd probably have to give them a probably a D plus, not a pass, not definitely not a C. Could have done better. Definitely could have done better there. But yeah, anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next stream or video whenever that is. So see you later, guys. Bye now.